All right, the clock has struck 3 p.m. Central European time. Thank you, everyone who has taken the time to join in on the webinar today. I know that some more attendees will probably be filing in after the top of the hour. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, 8 Steps to Save 80 Hours on Supplier Due Diligence. My name is Sam Jenks. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Kodiak Hub, and I will be your host for today's webinar. In addition, I am actually joined by my co-host, as I typically am, the office dog, Charlie. So if you hear a bark in the background, it's just Charlie adding his point of view to the day's content. And unfortunately, sorry, Richard, I don't have your picture here. My colleague, Richard Teuchler, will be in the background, of course, today helping me present, primarily then launching out polls. So keep those fingers ready to be able to vote. Short about Kodiak Hub, for those who don't know about us, Kodiak Hub is a cloud-based supplier management suite, providing supplier relationship management solutions for procurement and sourcing professionals just like you to build smarter and more sustainable supplier relationships in the form of robust ratings and analytics. Our solution is an ecosystem of applications that is pretty much modular, helping our customers to be able to plug and play as they would like to be able to manage supplier information, risk, compliance, performance, and collaboration all from one place. During the course of today's webinar, of course, you will become more thoroughly acquainted with the Kodiak Hub solution, and of course, better understand how our solution can be able to help you guys to streamline your supplier due diligence, which is why we're all in attendance today. On to today's webinar agenda. During the next 40 minutes, I think that we have planned today. We're going to try and thoroughly cover the following points. So we're going to get right into today's content. I'm in the midst of the introduction here, but soon after that, we're going to jump into a section that I like to call Supplier Due Diligence. It ain't sexy, but it's soon the law. Next section, of course, will be a case study spotlight, which is very exciting, showing how our customer, HL Display, has saved months of work on supplier due diligence with Kodiak Hub. And then the meat and bones of the actual session today, of course, 8 steps to create massive time savings, in particular 80 hours, and that's on the actual conservative side of things for supplier due diligence. With that, we'll get into a demonstration of Kodiak Hub's SRM solution and actually show off some functionality that our customers are using today to be able to manage supplier due diligence in a more streamlined manner. And then at the end of the session, we will save 3 to 5 minutes for a Q&A. Please, at any point in time, if you have a question, just write it in the chat bubble, and we'll then make sure to pull out some of those questions at the end of today's session to be able to respond to as well. Without any further ado, let's get right into today's content as we have plenty to be able to get through. I think that it's important to start a little bit high level and get a little bit more concrete. But at Kodiak Hub, we believe truly that trust has become your most valuable currency. And with this, your buyer to supplier relationships are going to be the foundation of profitable and sustainable business. But of course, to ensure that you in fact can trust your suppliers, you must start testing your suppliers. Due diligence is a necessary step to ensure that your suppliers are going to be able to live up to your expectations. We all know this, right? Due diligence should be expected at the start of any supplier relationship. It should serve really as a foundation within your supplier relationship management, and it should be seen also as an iterative process, right? Throughout the course of the buyer-supplier relationship. A lot of kind of misconception is that due diligence is a one and off, right? You got to make sure that you're managing these things over time in the same manner. Supplier due diligence, as we all know, I mean, it might not be so sexy, but it is, of course, an essential building block for innovative and open buyer to supplier relationships. Oh, that's right. And I forgot to mention, it might soon, in fact, be the law. On the 23rd of February this year, the European Commission attempted to kickstart a new era of due diligence. It published a proposal that was called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And this proposal is part of really the EU's, effort to achieve various goals set by the Paris Agreement, the European Green Deal, and other aspects. I mean, we see this in other legislation currently today within Germany, for example, Lieferkettengesetz, for those that are in attendance within that region. You guys are well aware with that Supply Chain Act, of course, as well. So what is this particular proposal all about, the Due Diligence Act? Well, the EU Supply Chain Due Diligence proposal aims to increase accountability for corporate leaders within social and environmental areas by 2025 for large companies and by 2027 for medium-sized companies in high-risk sectors. Corporate directors will have their duty of care to be expanded, really. They're going to have to pretty much, in a nutshell, focus and enforce more responsible business practices at scale, encouraging more ambitious ESG targets, more ambitious ESG management, and of course, a means to report. So now that you, of course, have an idea here of what this new legislation is all about, the question is, if it gets passed, will it affect your business? Well, simply put, probably so. The EU Due Diligence Directive makes a distinction between two types of companies that it aims to regulate. They're broken down into Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 is an EU incorporated limited liability company that has at least 500 employees and a net turnover of 150 million worldwide. Group 2 would be then other smaller limited liability companies that are operating in a resource-intensive industry with over 250 employees and a net turnover of 40 million euro worldwide. I mean, the size of these companies is encompassing both SMEs, small, medium enterprises, but also multinational enterprises. And the question that we have, pausing here for our first poll of today, is, according to the proposed legislation, which of these two groups would your company in fact fall under? 500 employees with a turnover of 150 million worldwide, or 250 employees with a net turnover of over 40 million, worldwide? Go ahead and give us a response if you have the time to our first poll for today. It's on screen right now, so you could be able to see what that poll is and respond. So it seems as if we have a fair amount of medium-sized, small, medium-sized enterprises in attendance today, medium-sized. It's a fair balance, at least, between kind of those larger entities and medium entities. And that, of course, is very interesting because, most of these companies, if not all of these companies, will be under the purview of this new legislation. And I think, though, that all of these companies will also have something to gain for today's tip. The fact is really, and encompassing the fact that it is both smaller entities, but also larger entities, it shows really that this is the new normal, right? People want to do business with businesses that care about people, the planet, and how their profit is made. I mean, the broadened requirements that are coming with this proposed legislation really solidify the importance of responsible sourcing and procurement practices. It's really a good time to get ahead of the legislation and take really a proactive approach. I mean, as we see in this particular graphic from the 2022 CPO Compass survey by procurement leaders, there is a consensus in the CPO community, it seems, right? Enhanced due diligence is a key element seen to be able to improve agility and to better manage supply chain volatility, something that in a post-COVID world, in a world where geopolitical aspects are playing in more and more on a day-to-day basis, this is, of course, going to be an increasing focus. And to display the benefits of being more proactive within supply chain due diligence, we'd like to actually take this opportunity to get into our next section for today's webinar, which is going to provide really some concrete examples of how Kodiak Hub has helped our Spotlight client to take their supplier due diligence from being manual to being magnificent. Our amazing customer, HL Display, has really seen massive benefits from adopting the Kodiak Hub solution, but also part of this 8-step program to be able to save time on supplier due diligence, right? Really streamlining supplier due diligence and enhancing their overall supply chain compliance. For those of you in attendance who don't know who HL Display is, it's only right to give a little bit of a background here. HL Display helps retailers and brands around the world to really create attractive and profitable in-store environments that strengthen the consumer shopping experience. HL Display has production sites in Sweden, Poland, China, and the UK, combined with sales units across more than 20 different countries globally. Their particular case was one that was, a very basic one, a very classic one, and I'm sure one that some people in attendance today might recognize. The challenge that HL Display faced was that they wanted to save time on supplier due diligence, on risk assessment, on supply chain compliance. Their group purchasing team had really recognized that supplier due diligence was going to be a pillar to help them meet their sustainability goals. And with close to 1,000 suppliers and a lot of supplier data localized or distributed in an ERP landscape that was, kind of spread out, or it was data that was scattered on individual stakeholders' computers, like in spreadsheets, notes, and emails, HL Display had a really hard time to leverage their supplier data in the most efficient way. Information was scattered and SRM process was really heavily manual, which meant that supplier due diligence on an entire supply chain, sometimes took as long as 8 to 10 months to be able to gain any clarity. So by the time that they were ready to report, it was time to start the process all over again. This might be something that some people in attendance today can recognize, right? As a solution, HL Display and Kodiak Hub started collaborating. They adopted our SRM solution to be able to centralize, onboard, and collect supplier data, getting their organization out of their supplier spreadsheets and their localized notes into a consolidated platform where their purchasing team gained an really deeper visibility, a central view, and a central access in order to better evaluate and analyze a more empiric set of supplier data and information. HL Display leveraged Kodiak Hub solutions for supplier self-assessment, for onboarding, also then other elements of the solution to be able to really meet their goals. They combine this with our rating methodology to ensure, as well as, with our global library of different types of industry-specific best practices to make sure that they were really meeting their legal, but also their industry-specific requirements that needed to be covered in their DD activities. The result of all of this work that HL Display has been doing within the Kodiak Hub solution is that they went from working 8 to 10 months to be able to create, send out, gather, and report on their supply chain compliance to being able to do it within 3 weeks, start to finish. Through the application of better SRM software, they also were able to meet some of their goals related to sustainability. 90% supplier code of conduct compliance was the goal, and they were able to meet that by applying the solution that Kodiak Hub has to offer. Simply, they were able to take their supplier due diligence from being manual to being magnificent, saving significant time in the process. It's about that time again here, and we want to hear from the audience. We'll stop here for a poll and ask, are you still managing your supplier due diligence in spreadsheets, in emails, and in homegrown solutions? Feel free to take some time and answer on this poll now. Are you still currently managing supplier due diligence in spreadsheets? Yes, no, you might have a solution already in place, but you also might have a homegrown solution in place. Seems like an overwhelming amount of people are responding that they are in fact still working in that kind of spreadsheet mode of operating, as we like to call it, the Excel hell. I'm sure that you're not doing it out of a want, but maybe a necessity. Maybe you haven't yet gotten the budget for tooling to be able to man up on supplier due diligence, and we are empathetic to that challenge, of course, as well. But we're going to show you a little bit of how you could be able to apply both our solution, but also some of the practices that we're going to talk about today to be able to save time on supplier due diligence. So I'm going to share my screen again here, and we're going to get back to today's content. I mean, Kodiak Hub has really seen on average that our users do see massive time savings from the application of our solution. In fact, we've seen on average, that there is a 15 to 20% time saving on operational supplier management activities, especially when companies are coming from this kind of Excel manual way of working, which is then applying our solution to be able to combat that manual work. Calculating really that your team is actively working at work for 10 months, right? Taking away vacation time, taking away bank holidays and alike. Each FTE would be putting in 1,600 hours. That means that Kodiak Hub solution can offer up to 240 hours of FTE time saving. And for the sake of safety, but also for the sake of alliteration when we were making this webinar, we've been rather conservative, showing some of the minimum savings that we've seen, which would be then 5% time savings. And that, of course, would then result in 80 hours of FTE savings in that case. At this point in time, we'd also like to stop, and we're curious here for another poll. Are you currently measuring the amount of time that your team is spending on supplier due diligence activities? We know that you might be working in a more manual fashion, but do you know how much time it's actually taking you? Just have Richard go ahead and launch this poll here. Seems as if there's an overwhelming response here that no, there is no insight into how much time there is that is being spent on supplier due diligence. And I would urge everyone then in attendance, of course, to try and start getting to the bottom of this. Where is the time savings? That's where the business case lies, of course. And I know that you guys know this, but it might be time to be able to take that into consideration if you're working in a manual manner and you want to be able to adopt something that is a new third-party solution. Getting back to the presentation here, as we have a bit more content to get into, and in fact, the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, of today's session. And I assume that you guys are all interested in better understanding how in the heck has HL Display taken this journey with Kodiak Hub. So it's time to get into our 8 steps to save 80 hours on supplier due diligence, starting with number 1 on the list. Make sure that you validate the business entity. This is the absolute first step to any supplier DD. You have to validate, of course, that the business that you're working with is the business that they say they are. This requires basic supplier information management during some type of, an RFI or pre-qualification process, right? Some of the data points that can be useful to gather back from the supplier during this information gathering are like a website, a DUNS number, a tax or identification number, VAT, company registration number, maybe their location or a person of contact or a person of contact's email address, right? These types of things are going to be the basic information that you're going to need to be able to start the process of vetting a supplier, really, and beginning to start building up a more balanced risk profile. The important thing here is to ensure that your data that you're gathering back isn't dead, right? So it's better that you're not getting this back into a spreadsheet or a Word document, but in fact into a solution that's going to have the ability to extract this data via APIs to have different types of cross-application data quality in the future. Say that this supplier does in fact become a supplier. You want to make sure that that can be, of course, visualized in other solutions as well, giving them that ticket to trade once they have completed that due diligence. Moving into number 2 on our list here, solidify a direct contact person. And of course, you can utilize that first step to be able to gather more information about a direct line of contact. And it's important to have a supplier point of contact, if not multiple points of contact within a supplier organization. We know that this is like pretty basic stuff, but if you're really planning to qualify and collaborate with a supplier, a super good indicator of how the collaboration is going to go is the engagement level of your direct supplier contact person, right? By solidifying a direct point of contact with a supplier stakeholder, you're going to be able to begin to really issue risk assessments to better understand a supplier's risk profile and their overall capacity to deliver in line with your needs. And the engagement of that point of contact is going to be very telling during the initial steps of due diligence. Moving along into step number 3, understand the contextual risk profile of the supplier, right? If you're going to start doing business in a region, a country, or within a category that you might have less insight into, it's important to deepen your understanding of the contextual risks that might come along with this uncharted territory. Our solution at Kodiak Hub offers a contextual risk assessment and country rating driven by over 20 internationally recognized indices in order to provide our users with some type of insight of the risks that they could be stepping into in new or existing supplier geographies, right? Upon the input of a supplier's country of origin, which of course can be done in the first step, they're automatically configured with a country risk rating, removing any type of manual work that is associated with you guys going out and searching for this data on your own. These country risk profiles cover social, environmental, financial, and geopolitical risks, which are driven by data sources that are kind of internationally known, right? ILO, ISO, UNDP, Transparency International, World Bank, Fitch Ratings, many others as well. And our impact data managers have worked to analyze this to be able to give potential risks per country. This is then definitely a more high level indicator of risk, but it's a great starting point to be able to dive deeper into a supplier DD, right? If there's some type of labor rights risk in a country, well, then your due diligence will be more warranted. If there's financial risks in a country, well, then it's an open discussion for additional commercial safeguards, right? Moving into then number 4 on our list, moving right along here, we're halfway points. Understand the financial status of the supplier. And this isn't just about the country. This is about the individual supplier. It's time to get granular here, right? Financial credit ratings don't always, of course, tell the entire story. We know this, but they are a really good starting point for discussion with your supplier, and centralizing credit checks in the same view as other supplier due diligence activities is a really good way to save time on qualification or approval, which is going to build a really balanced view of your supplier's profile. If we look at kind of what the traditional mode of operating is, right? Say that you don't have a solution in place. It might look a little bit like this. Step 1, the supplier shares their information. That data is then shared with the finance team. The finance team will then receive back some type of reports. The report is then going to be vetted and checked through, and feedback will then be given to the procurement team to be able to act upon it as necessary in any way that they need to be able to continue the due diligence process. Does it look familiar? In fact, we're curious, does it look familiar? So we're actually going to pause here for a poll. Does this description of how financial credit checks are running on your suppliers during due diligence fairly depict how your supplier or your company actually runs financial checks? Would you say that this fairly depicts the way that you guys are working today? It seems like the majority of stakeholders are saying kind of. I mean, it could be a legal team, it could be something alike, it could be a few steps in between, or maybe one removed. But generally speaking, it seems like most attendees are working this way today to be able to gauge financial credit. We understand that, this is the kind of traditional mode of operating. What we want to show off a little bit more is about how you guys could be able to start working in Kodiak Hub in order to be able to streamline some of this activities related to supplier due diligence and financial checks. This is what it looks like a little bit in Kodiak Hub. The supplier is able to share their information during step 1 of the due diligence process, right? They're able to share a VAT or a company registration number or some type of other identifier, and directly driven by a third-party data source, the supplier is configured with a financial credit rating. This is directly integrated into our interface, and it cuts down on that back and forth admin, right? That can be incredibly time consuming, and it often relies on multiple instances of manual intervention, right? As well as then giving you kind of a minimal output. It's just a financial rating that you're getting back, but sometimes this takes so much time to be able to even do. Moving into number 5 on our list of the 8 steps to save 80 hours on supplier due diligence. And I think that we've already maybe saved you 40 hours with these first 4 steps, but we'll try and finish out strong here. Automate your sanctioned, politically exposed person and media checks. And I mean, just like your financial status, your supplier geopolitical status and brand exposure are becoming increasingly important to be able to vet properly, right? To ensure that you're entering into a relationship with a supplier that is going to be somebody that you actually want to associate your brand with. They don't have any skeletons in the closet, right? Kodiak Hub solution uses basic data points, such as a supplier's name, to be able to automate sanction and media scans, which are driven by third-party data providers, which are natively integrated into our interface, just like the country risk and the financial credit ratings. And this functionality reduces the time spent, hopping between third-party solutions to be able to gain different types of risk insights, but it also provides a means for ongoing sanction and media monitoring, which is going to ensure that you stay on top of the happenings in your supply chain that could consequently impact your brand value as well. Moving in then quickly to number 6, make sure that you're asking your suppliers for references. A supplier is really never going to give you a poor reference. Even so, if you're serious about a future collaboration, hearing from a reference customer is always useful. Even though most references are going to be positive, right? The engagement and the willingness to provide a reference from the supplier side can be rather telling, right? These kinds of activities to receive can also be centralized in a communication portal and archived in solutions like Kodiak Hub. And I think that centralizing these types of small interactions, such as asking for references and the like, allows your entire team to stay in the loop. It creates a backlog of communication and activities managed during the DD process, and it saves your time on admin, as well as then reduces kind of that single person dependent mode of operating, and it makes things more process dependent, more centralized and visible for the entire team. Moving forward into step number 7 on our list, make sure that you're assessing the business related risks associated with your suppliers. I mean, due diligence requires direct governance of the supplier base, and a thorough due diligence process should really give the supplier the opportunity to respond back on their level of compliance to your business requirements. Assessments take your team time to develop, but they also take the supplier time to respond upon. And the last thing that you want is for your suppliers to be questioning the importance of your assessments. So your team needs to make sure that they're issuing these different types of assessments to suppliers with the 4 R's in mind, as we like to call it at Kodiak Hub. These R's are rationale, relevancy, and responsiveness and recognition, making sure that your suppliers know the importance, making sure that things are relevant to the category that you're working with, making sure that you have a means to feed back to supplier respondents, and also that you're not afraid of showing the supplier when they're doing a good job. Saving time on supplier assessments and really understanding the business related risks can lie within a few factors, but we've tried to identify some of the big time savers that a solution like Kodiak Hub can be able to drive. First and foremost, making the work self-service for the supplier within dynamic portals or online forms. This is also done by ensuring that the supplier has a sleek UI and a UX, a user experience that's going to make sure that the supplier knows what to do and it's removing the response barrier, right? Of course, providing a means for more streamlined sendouts and responses, a means for more streamlined document sharing and document storage, an ability to more quickly spot risks and opportunities, and this can be driven by Kodiak Hub's rating or flagging methodology, but also a means to be able to analyze and compare supplier responses quickly. These are all different types of things that Kodiak Hub solution can be able to help with, or other third-party solutions, right, to be able to really save you guys time on this particular step. And we'll demonstrate this in just a second when we get into the live demo. But before we do so, let's round off with step number 8 on our list of 8 steps to save 80 hours on supplier DD. And that, of course, would be centralizing collaboration and corrective actions. I mean, just because your supplier doesn't have tip-top results after running your new and improved supplier DD process, it doesn't mean that they're not the supplier for you, right? They might still be. This due diligence, though, is a step to ensure that you really understand the lay of the land. It gives you a clearer picture of the risks and the opportunities that await in your future opportunity. Time savings can come in this process with the ability to be able to centralize the process of corrective actions and the workflow for managing actions. Kodiak Hub solution gives our users the ability to be able to do this so that they can quickly see supplier-related risks in balanced scorecards and act upon those actions directly from the same solution. This keeps comms and document sharing in the same format and solution, which is going to cut down on the opportunity of human error when any type of corrective actions are being managed in email or alike. So now, in the spirit of not just talking about it, but in fact being about it, I would like to switch over my screen to provide a quick 10-minute demonstration of the Kodiak Hub solution to better display here how our solution can be able to help create massive time savings on supplier due diligence. But before we get into the solution demonstration, I'd like to know from those that are out there, would you like to actually see an extended demonstration after today's session sometime in the coming month with one of our representatives? And if you would like to see an extended demonstration of Kodiak Hub, please respond so now, and we'll make sure that you can be able to do so. So respond, please, on the poll that is now on screen, and we'll make sure that we'll reach out. If not, go ahead and just vote no, not right now, or don't vote at all. But it's appreciated if you let us know if you are interested. And again, we'll make sure to reach out briefly after today's session. With that, I'm going to jump into the solution. So we can be able to walk through a little bit of some of the stuff that we talked about in this view of the 8 steps. But now we'll actually be able to see the practical application in the solution. So welcome to the Kodiak Hub solution. For those of you that have never seen it, for those that are in attendance that are maybe, I don't know, those that have already seen the solution or customers, welcome back, of course. At a glance, we're able to see our suppliers around the globe. We can be able to directly see here then the safe source rating, which is that macro risk rating driven by social, environmental, geopolitical, and financial indices, which is then giving us a macro risk, country risk, contextual risk rating for countries where we do and don't have suppliers located. We can, of course, zoom further in to where we have supplier groupings. We can also be able to expand upon a supplier profile and see their overall average rating directly here. If we would like to, we could be able to utilize this particular view to segment up or down our supplier base in this map overview. And this is driven then by different types of global filters, which you can be able to customize in the solution as necessary, right? So say that we want to be able to quickly find all of our producers and manufacturers around the globe, well, then we can be able to quickly do that in that case. The supplier list overview is another quick way for us to be able to utilize the solution to find suppliers who might be risk suppliers driven by a flag, for example. So our customers in different types of due diligence activities, such as self-assessment, can be able to predefine criteria. Say that a supplier doesn't sign off of your code of conduct, but that's something that is necessary within your due diligence. Then you can directly flag the supplier based upon their response on that criteria and that they haven't shared a signed code of conduct. This is also a quick way to be able to find, top or bottom performers driven by the rating methodology. The rating methodology is also driven by predefined criteria that you and your company can be able to customize based upon your goals and your KPIs within your due diligence, within performance evaluation, or other activities that you might be managing with the supplier. Talking about the data, there is 4 data points that are needed. It's a supplier name, a supplier ID, a supplier country, as well as a supplier contact email. With those 4 data points and an upload of those 4 data points via a simple CSV and an Excel upload, so getting you out of your spreadsheets directly into the solution, you just have to upload your data, matching it with your data criteria, and then simply popping it into the solution. You're going to be able to then start pushing for that initial supplier information management to your suppliers, right? Where we're able to do so is within the assessments area. This is where you're going to be able to, with the help of the Insight onboarding and self-assessment tool, actually push to the supplier different types of information management, but also different types of questionnaires that you might want filled out in that case, driven by your own business critical needs. When we look at a particular assessment template, we can be able to see this template and we can be able to see the builder here, showing off also how we can be able to save you time on actually defining the criteria and building your assessments that you're going to be sending out to supplier. You can give it a description internally here so everybody knows what this particular template is to be used for, who it is that this template is going to be sent to, and also what language the different types of criteria is going to be sent out in. You can be able to choose different rating areas, up to 14 different fixed areas that underneath those individual areas you can determine your more granular criteria that you would like a supplier to respond upon. In the data check, you can be able to then drag in and drag out different types of data. So say that we want the supplier, for example, to report in with these different data properties, well, then we can be able to keep them in scope. The way that it works is that if you already have data on file for the supplier, they'll be able to see that data and actually check off that it is correct, update that data, or provide you with new data that you're asking for within these particular areas. Again, this is then the initial information management, for example, to gather data such as a company registration number that's going to drive the actual financial rating, or the name of the supplier or the entity which will drive media or the sanction lists and the like. The content, you can be able to build a landing page so the supplier knows what they're about to get into. And underneath the individual areas, you can be able to determine what are in fact the questions that we want to be able to ask. These questions are driven entirely by what we call an attribute library. This is an attribute library, and attributes are really just a fancy way of saying questions, right? These questions are driven then by a best practice library that we have with over 4,000 best practices of questions to be able to ask and different types of KPIs to be able to meet in these different areas. And you guys can be able to choose what it is that you want and simply then determine those, toggle them on and activate them and drag them in or out of scope very quickly. You can be able to do things, of course, as well here, such as like set relationships between these questions. So there's conditional logic. So show a question if or skip a question if the response to the question before was this or that. And again, this is coming back to that relativity of the solution or of the assessment that you're going to be sending out, the different types of things that are going to enhance the supplier's response rates as well. When it comes to the actual interaction with the supplier, you can build up your emails, and this is how the supplier is going to be able to interact with the actual emails and the actual assessment. You can build up to 5 emails, which you can be able to build exactly like you would like to. So it's branded and it looks and feels like it's coming from you, that it has an engaging subject line that's going to be opened by the supplier as well. Once you're ready to be able to send out, it's as simple as starting a campaign. A campaign is just a simple and quick way of saying a send out. So we'll say that this is a supplier DD campaign. And we'll be able to then choose one of those particular templates that we have. We'll choose a master template for self-assessment that we already have activated. We'll be able to choose then the different suppliers that we want in scope. Say, for example, we only want to be able to send to our non-approved suppliers. So we could be able to then quickly toggle to our non-approved suppliers, select all those filtered suppliers, add them into scope, and start scheduling out those emails as well. So they can be able to get a different email at any point in which they respond, then it'll stop the sending chain. If they don't respond, then it will continue to push an email to that supplier as a notification and update. You can add attachments here like a code of conduct or some type of requirements that the supplier needs to see. And the rest of the work is put onto them, both for information gathering, but also to be able to gather back some of that information related to compliance, right? What do you guys start seeing on the front end? Well, results start rolling in, and you guys are going to get a really robust supplier scorecard. Within the area of sustainability and governance, you're going to see the way that the supplier has responded on these different types of questions, driving those business-related risks, which of course you guys can actually dig into individually to be able to better understand the response driven by the value that they have actually responded, and actually then on the front end given a score or a rating driven by your predetermined weight that you put on those particular response values. You can see all the data properties that the supplier has responded back with. And those data properties, for example, such as the VAT or company registration number, might be driving insights like this financial credit rating. Everything 360-degree view directly in this solution, so you're able to see a really robust overview of the data that's coming in. You can also expand upon to see the different types of media and things that are going on. Here I've done a particular search for a company that is actually then Siemens, and we are able to then directly get up all the different data points about this company, articles that have been posted, so we can be able to actually jump in if we would like to and read more about those individual articles. We can also be able to get a view of different types of sanctions or politically exposed person lists. We can do some type of a query if we would like to. That's simply by putting in the entity's name, and we can be able to then further down see the Safe Sort Premium results. These results are then going to give us a general overview of the entity of this company. We're going to be able to see more results like linked subsidiaries, for example, that might be special interest companies, all the way down to individuals who are politically exposed. Again, keeping all of the information as far as financial credit checks goes, as far as then sanctions, PEP, and media goes, in the same space where we are able to then view all of the information that was directly shared with us, where we can also view the contextual risks that have been, kind of configured, driven by the country that this particular supplier is located within as well. So we can see everything directly here in one space. Say that we have corrective actions to be able to issue to the supplier. We can then be able to see those here centralized in one place, and we can directly jump into those actions. And this is then pretty much a space that we can collaborate back and forth, share documents, communicate as we would like to with the supplier. And there's a chat line pretty much here where both parties can be able to push forward or backward the activity. And everyone's able to see then also a history of what it is that's happened during the course of this particular action as well. So you guys can be able to make sure that you keep your actions centralized in one place, so everybody's going to be able to also view them as you see within the supplier scorecard. What are the ongoing actions that we have? What are those that are pending approval, so forth and so on. And we can also then quickly find all the documents that have been shared with us. Compliance documentation, commercial documentation, things that are simple as things that we want to upload, right? Like meeting notes or like, giving us a really 360-degree view again of the supplier relationship, keeping everything centralized directly here. The information and documentation that was shared with us in the supplier self-assessment, everything's tanked down. The responses are then weighted, driven by the rating methodology, giving you the ability to quickly then spot individual risks, but also to be able to see value progression over time. Is a supplier getting better, or are they getting worse within these different areas as well? That is what I wanted to be able to demonstrate for today. We have a whole analytics section that we didn't even get into that I would love to dive deeper into. And I would love to dive deeper into the solution from various aspects for those that are in fact interested. And we're going to stop here then for a Q&A session. But before we do, I'm actually going to quickly share my screen again. So if you would like to get a demonstration of the solution, just simply go ahead and scan this QR code that you have. If you haven't already responded back in the poll that we launched earlier, go ahead, turn on your camera on your mobile phone, scan this particular QR code, and you can directly go into a meeting booking link where you can be able to book up a upcoming demo with somebody in our team. I think that we have quite a bit of availability in about 2 weeks' time and later in June as well within our organization. But go ahead and scan that if you're interested in doing so right now. Otherwise, we'll also then pause here to move on to the Q&A section. During the Q&A, feel free to just pop in different types of questions that you might have about Kodiak Hub, about the material that we've presented today. And you can do so directly in the chat bubble, and we'll pick out a few of those questions to be able to respond to during the next 3 to 5 minutes. I know that we're a bit over time here, but please feel free if you have any questions to ask them now.